Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Archetypal Radio. I'm your host, Michael. What's going on, y'all? It's been a hot minute. I've been making some changes to the podcast, going through a lot of changes just in general. I really wanted to start shifting over to, I know I've been talking about a lot of like psychological concepts and inner guidance, and we had a guest on the show recently. And I always really wanted to explore like the archetypal themes and patterns and imagery and various like books and movies and things like that. And I had the idea to do it with Arrival a while ago. Unfortunately, I didn't record whenever I watched it most recently, and it's really the best. It's best to come in fresh from watching those so that the images are all in your head and everything. And I just never did that. So there will be an episode on that in sometime in the near future whenever I get around to watching that film again. It has to be the right time, or else, you just won't be the right time. And I'll continue to be interviewing folks on here. We have Shirley DeVere coming on the show in July. Shirley is an LMFT and has been for over 20 years and practices more on a somatic modality. She's part of the doctoral program at CIIS, where I was a student up until this past fall. And yeah, we're going to be talking about the psychotherapy of touch and how we can begin to incorporate that more so into our practices and the kind of her method and practices of consent and moving through that journey of touch, because touch really is our first language and it's how we communicate with the world when we first come into it. So that's going to be a really fascinating episode. I hope you guys stick around for that one. But today, what I'm going to be exploring is the archetypal themes and imagery behind the Disney film Hercules. And one, this is very near and dear to my heart. It came out in '97 when I was a young kiddo. Watching it this past weekend, I hadn't seen the movie in I want to say it's probably been close to 20 years. So it opened up a really deep part of my psyche. And I realized how much I gravitated to this kind of storyline. And it's just such a, because it uses the Greek pantheon, it has just a trove of archetypal narratives and images, and having this knowledge can really be beneficial to our own lives. We can kind of see where we repeat these stories in our lives because they do transcend time and space. And so Hercules is certainly it's certainly a typical hero's journey sort of film, the whole fall from grace thing, and that this original divinity that we kind of fall from and become mortal. We come into these bodies that get hurt and die and all that stuff. And it's also just a beautiful, beautiful rendition of a anima animus story. And so those are Jungian terms for the anima is the feminine aspect of a male or male identified individual, and the animus is the masculine part of a feminine identified or female individual. And you see these principally in the two main characters, Hercules and Meg. And those are just, those images are so powerful, and it echoed something that I'm going through in my own life at this point. So it spoke volumes to me, and I knew that I could kind of elucidate the deeper themes behind the Hercules myth and narrative as it's portrayed here in the Disney film. And so without further ado, let's dive in. So I'm not going to be using any images or things like that. You'll have benefited from seeing the film, and you'll also kind of get a synopsis from me visiting through this. But we open on the young Hercules being born to Hera and Zeus, Mount Olympus. Everyone's really joyous. There's a huge celebration, and the young child is there. It's not the true story of Hercules. I believe the classic Greek myth is more of the darker aspect of Greek mythology, where it's quite rapey, and Zeus is just kind of like he's a god, and so he just kind of goes everywhere and fucks everybody, and has various love children, of which Hercules is one. But a lot of the Christian imagery gets seen in here. We'll explore that a little bit later on when Hercules first comes into contact with his divine identity. But for right now, everything is just beautiful. Hercules is just up in the world, on Mount Olympus, and everything's great. except for one thing. The one person that arrives late and causes everyone a lot of dismay is, of course, Hades, king of the underworld. And so Hades is obviously very resentful. He's really bitter. He says that, oh, I'm really busy with this full-time gig that you gave me, Zeus, i.e. dealing with all of the mortals and their souls and passing them through the underworld and things like that. He's really resentful of all of this. And so, of course, with all resentful folks, you see this kind of this not so convincing facade of jovialness or of that fake camaraderie. And this is part of Zeus's downfall, is that he's just so oblivious to this, just so oblivious. And that's what can happen when you're very up in the clouds, as one might say. And so Hades, he doesn't want to live in the underworld anymore. He doesn't want to do this thing anymore. And so he hatches a plan to destroy Hercules, the one person that can put his plans, that can just derail the whole thing. Because if he reaches maturity, if he knows who he is, then there's just no chance of Hades taking the throne. And how is he going to do that? How is he going to take Zeus's throne? He's going to unleash the elemental forces of the earth, namely earth, fire, water in the form of ice and air. And here's the thing about Hades, is that he is a classical tyrant. He doesn't lead with any compassion. He really only gives a shit about himself and his plans and his misery and all of this. And so even the beings that are closest to him, the ones that cooperate with him, namely Pain and Panic, his two little sidekicks, who are just always fucking up in hilarious ways, are also really they're motivated primarily by avoiding suffering. And so this ends up manifesting in the initial slip up that permits Hercules to move towards his destiny, which is that Pain and Panic end up losing Hercules, and they simply say, like, well, whatever the boss doesn't know won't hurt him, and so we're just gonna let it slide, and we'll lie, and it'll be fine. We won't have to work, and we won't get punished for this. And so Hercules falls from Mount Olympus. He's given a poison that's supposed to kill him, but he has to drink every last drop. And the final drop gets spilled on the ground, and so it only makes him mortal, and he retains his godlike strength. Actually, yeah, it's meant to make him totally mortal. He retains this last little bit of godliness, which is his incredible strength. And so this is one of the themes that you'll see in a lot of different hero myths and a lot of different myths of the self, which is that we're born to two sets of parents. We have our human parents here on the earth, the ones that copulate. I know you guys don't like thinking about that, but that's how you came in. You have your parents that copulate and the mother that births you into the world. And then you have your other set of parents, which are your divine parents. In this case, Zeus and Hera. And that's pretty clear in, like, say, the Jesus of Nazareth myth. That's a hard one to say. Where he's born to a set of human parents, Joseph and Mary, and then he has his father up in heaven. And Mary kind of gets, this is one of the interesting things about Christianity, is that archetype kind of gets mixed in with the true mother. And just a brief segue here is, I think it's a really beautiful exploration, is that the idea of a virgin, or the word that we got virgin from in the original Hebrew text, did not mean someone that didn't have sex, that had never had sex before, that hadn't been defiled by the phallus or whatever. No, the actual translation of the word, and I don't know what the word is derived from, is a woman whose primary relationship is not to her husband, but to God. And that's a very important distinction to make. So Mary is not someone that necessarily never had sex before. She wasn't pure in that way, but she was pure in the fact that her primary relationship was to God, and that her relationship to her husband was secondary to that. That's very important for everyone listening, for the women listening, for the men listening. And we'll explore this later on in the film. because really the most important thing you can do in a relationship is not prioritize the relationship. Actually, of course, you always have that sense of loving your partner and holding them and admiring them and just being juicy and in love and building a life together and all of these things. But if you make your relationship the primary ground upon which you base your being, you're going to run into trouble. And so it's better if the both of you are aiming towards something higher. Namely, you could call it God, you could call it a higher purpose or whatever. But if you're both aiming towards that, you will inevitably move up towards it rather than trying to meet each other here on this plane. And so Hercules, he manages to retain his godlike strength. He comes to his Greek parents that are just sheep and goat farmers. And he runs into a lot of trouble because he has this extraordinary power within him. And there's something that in him that's calling towards something higher. And this puts him at odds with all of the people around him that he would like to belong with. And it's kind of a critical key in the journey towards higher consciousness, or the journey towards individuation and essentially reclaiming the divinity within, is that people that have an early calling to do this, they tend to have difficulty really understanding what it is and how they can fit into society. And in Hercules' case, this is his godly strength. And he's young and he's an adolescent, and he just doesn't know how to wield it at all. He's really clumsy. Whenever he tries to help, he ends up inevitably destroying the entire town, and everyone, he gets called a freak, and it really like hurts him. And it's this pain of not belonging that he brings to his father, and he says, I don't know what to do. I just want to belong. And it feels like everything I do, I just can't do it. I just don't get it. I don't understand. And so this is when his parents reveal to him that, we found you one night. This was around your neck, the symbol of the gods. And he knew that he was destined for things. And he has this very lovely, emotional parting with his parents. And his parents essentially do what any good parent should do. And they say, we love you so much. We're going to miss you. We know that you have to go on this journey. And so Hercules goes through this little montage of enduring the wind and the rain and all the hardships that come through it. And he gets to the temple of Zeus, where he goes to his hands and knees in this very kind of Christian way and prays to the Father God, which certainly our image of God, or the image of Yahweh, is based upon. And so here it is revealed to him by Zeus in the temple that he was born to his parents, and that because he lost his divinity, because he lost his godhood, he could not return to Mount Olympus. However, he is given a means out of this, which is, if you become a true hero, then you will be able to return and you'll be able to come back to us. And so he gives him the instruction to, I forget the name of the trainer, but played by Danny DeVito in a very hilarious way, the Goat Man hero trainer. He's given instruction to go see him and begin learning how to use his powers, essentially. And so he learns how to use his powers, and he trains for who knows how long, really, but he becomes, this kind of scraggly adolescent with huge feet and legs, and into the image of Hercules that we know, which is the big buff, very I wouldn't say necessarily articulate, but he's, he has a sense of himself. He's very skilled. He's kinesthetically aware in a way he wasn't before. He knows how to use his body. He knows how to use his strength. He knows how to use his powers. And to the point where he can just smash through Phil's final test. That's right. His name is Phil. Phil, the Goat Man hero trainer, and is able to master his training. And so from there, he's given the real test of going into the world. And so he's prepared in his training, but of course, nothing can prepare him for an actual encounter. So his first meeting with a centaur, I don't remember his name, but whatever, he comes across a damsel in distress who is being plagued by a centaur. We have no context into what the situation is. We learn about it a little bit later. But here he has his first real test. He has no idea what he's supposed to do. He's only ever trained in obstacle courses and dummies and stuff like that. He's never faced a flesh and blood opponent. And he gets a little beat up by this giant centaur, but eventually is able to claim the day and save the damsel, somewhat to her distress, because as we learn later, this was Meg, the damsel in distress, was trying to get the river guardian, the centaur, to join his plot for overthrowing the gods. And so from here, this is where Hercules has his first encounter. He's like, oh wow, look at a damsel, and he's struck from the very beginning by her. And so this is the beginning of the anima animus story, is they both recognize each other. She's like, oh wow, you're a real hero, huh? Meg is that wonderful, beautiful, seductive, sexy, in her power, don't need no man sort of thing. And she encounters him and kind of walks away. Hercules is struck and like can't stop thinking about her. But Phil, his guide and mentor, is able to get him to Thebes, where he can really start putting on or being a real hero by enacting his work in the world. And of course, well, we're going to kind of speed ahead a little bit. He faces the Hydra through a deception. Meg leads him to the two boys stuck under the rock, which are actually Pain and Panic in disguise, yada, yada, yada. All of the things that he thinks are solutions, he has to rethink his entire way of doing things, I suppose you could say, because of the fight with the Hydra. The whole slashing thing isn't going to really work, because every time you slash off its head, 3 more come up, to the point where it's just this big tangly mess. But he ends up doing it, right? He ends up saving the day through basically an act of desperation, which was destroying the entire mountain, bringing it down. That mountain is a very strong masculine phallic symbol of tradition. He has to break everything that he knows in order to defeat this new monster and grow into his herohood. And so he defeats the Hydra, and from that point he can do no wrong. And he gets all of the worldly accolades and acclaim and the love of the people and all of these things, to the point where he kind of loses his own life. And he returns to the temple one day and he says, it must be really time, right? Like, what more could I do to be a true hero? I've made all this money. Everyone loves me. I've brought Thebes back into a state of order, and people are happy. They're not being plagued by monsters, all this stuff. There's less crime. There's more food, more stability, all of these things. All the while, Hades' plan is unfolding beneath the surface. No one knows that the planets are all about to align, and a gateway will be opened to the prison where the elemental forces have been kept at bay for the last thousands of years, the Titans. And so this is all brewing and we have no idea. And of course, unbeknownst to everyone until this point, what has happened with Meg. So let's focus on, we're turning now over to the story of Meg, why she is in the employ of the god of the underworld, why this is essentially her animus, right? This is her inner masculine. And her story was that she had a lover who was dying and who was in danger of dying. And she loved him so much that she made a deal with Hades that if he lived, she would give him her soul. And the deal is fulfilled. He is restored to life, but then he finds another woman. And at this point now, her soul belongs to him, to Hades. And she decided from that point forward that was far too painful to ever go through again. And so she kind of swears off men in general. And she puts on her seductress, because now that Hades has become aware of Hercules' existence, much to the dismay of Pain and Panic, now he's trying to find out what his weakness is. And it really seems that he has no weakness, because every monster that he's encountered, he's destroyed. But he knows that there must be something. And so he sends Meg to find out what that is. And of course, the thing that is his weakness, that is his Achilles heel in this, is Meg, is his anima, is his soul. Because all this time he's been pursuing the worldly thing and trying to be the true healer, being the true healer, really honoring his structure, his order, his training, all of these things, of which Phil is certainly encouraging him, but he really hasn't delved into what he loves and what he enjoys, and what his feelings are and things like that. So he's really been anima neglected. And so Meg comes through and she convinces him to take a day off, and they go to the theater, and they have fun, and he discovers this new way of being. He feels so alive. This is the classic anima possession feeling. It's the classic, he's projected it onto her, and now he is totally enamored. And this will be the chink in his armor, if you will. This will be his downfall. And so Hades makes a deal with Meg, and he essentially says, I will give you what you most desire if you discover his weakness to the point where I can exploit it. If you do that, I will give you your freedom. And this is a choice, and this is something that a conflict that every woman encounters, or every female identified person encounters, and every person really encounters in their own inner feminine, outer feminine, whatever it is, to make the choice to be with a certain person or with a certain individual. And there's a loss of freedom that comes with that. There's a limiting of ability for the woman and for everyone. Making that choice is making any choice necessarily nullifies the chances of other ones, other partners, other possibilities, other places you can go, all of these things. You have to make a choice. And this is the classic kind of Emily Dickinson poem. Hopefully it's not Sylvia Plath. I always get this one confused. But it's that idea of the apples falling from the tree, and each apple is a potential future. And you're looking at this tree of your life, and you're watching the apples ripen and fall. And so there's that chance of, like, you could be a scientist, you could be an artist, you could be an entrepreneur, you could be a father, mother, whatever. And there's all these possibilities to choose from. But as your life goes on, those apples continue to fall from the tree and rot. And there's different possibilities that you end up never taking because you just never made a choice. But this is the conflict that Meg is going through. Her anima, Hades, has this, you can have total freedom if you just bring down the man that loves you the most. And it's not even the man that loves you the most, but this kind of otherworldly figure, this demigod. And it's the one thing that can essentially put Hades' plan into motion. He doesn't necessarily have to kill him. He just has to make it to where he's out of commission for a day. And so this is a classic dilemma that a lot of people do, myself included, is that he's so open and so wants this person that he gives over this tremendous power. And something that was told to me by a spiritual guide and mentor of mine recently was that where there is love, there is no will to power. And this is why love cannot be everything in the relationship. It's a tough one to integrate and to deal with, but it's one that we would all benefit a lot from doing. And that's the thing that you should be putting your power towards, or that you should be giving your power to, is not another person. It is that thing within yourself that is infinitely wise, good, beneficent, and wants the best for you. And in fact, when you are in a relationship where both people are doing that, the capacity for love and enjoyment actually increases tremendously. And so this is played out in a very literal fashion. Hades says, you know what, Hercules, like, seems like you really like this woman. She's mine. I own her. She made a deal with me for her soul. And if you want her to live, then give me your strength for a day. And so you literally see him relinquish his power for her. And he feels so betrayed by this. It's such a really, this is probably my favorite image from the movie, is him being covered in like green slime soda from pain and panic. He's literally defiled, and he puts his hands in his face. He puts his face in his hands, and Meg can't bear to watch either. And the two of them are just kind of like juxtaposed. He's like either more in the foreground and her in the background, or one of the other two, but they're like both parting, and they're both miserable, and both she can't bear to see him, and he cannot bear this betrayal. And it literally takes the life out of him, or it takes the power out of him, and he's no longer the semi-divine hero. He is he's defeated. And so and this leads us to a very interesting depiction. I feel like the animators of this film were very archetypically tuned in, because there's the four titans of the four elements of the earth, wind, fire, and water / ice. And but there's a fifth one, and he's a big, gnarly, fat cyclops. And the cyclops is very indicative of single-mindedness, unitary vision, not being able to see from another perspective. And what does Hercules do? He knows that he has to go fight this thing because it's destroying Thebes, and it's calling out his name. It's like, Hercules, where are you? And God, he says something so that will resonate with so many people in this audience, which is that Meg sees that he's going to go fight this thing without any of his power, and she says, you're going to be killed. And he says, there are worse things. And it's that beautiful kind of like feminine stab, which is, yeah, I don't mind dying so much. It's a lot better than what I feel right now. It's a lot better than this betrayal. And this thing, the cyclops, this very critical voice, is just toying with him and fucking him up, and it's going to kill him and all this stuff. It's just destroying him. And for some people, that actually does become what happens, right? I mean, how many of us have beat ourselves up? Whenever I've been in this scenario before, that's certainly where my mind goes, is this myopic, single-minded vision of, you are not worthy. This is all your faults, yada, yada, yada. That's the masochistic part of ourselves. And so some people, that actually does get actualized, right, into suicide, where that myopic voice claims their life, where they actually kill themselves. But Phil is able to talk some sense into him. He gets some restoration from his animal spirit and from Pegasus, and he's able to use his mind in a way where his powers fail him, his cunning remains, and he's able to tie up this this big oaf and stick a torch in his eye, his one eye, and defeat him. And so that's really the main element that I wanted to cover, was that anima animus interaction, if you will, or that relationship between the anima and the animus, is that we all get hurt in our experience. And for women especially, there's this relinquishment of freedom by being with a particular person or a particular partner and having been spurned before. And I'm speaking for a woman's experience. I know I'm not a woman, so I'm just going to mention that now. But there seems to be a degree of truth to that. And then speaking from the male perspective or the masculine perspective, that conferring of primordial power to a partner can be very dangerous. And if it's not backed up with a proper structure, then it's just a consequence. Like if you totally give yourself over to another person, then unless there is like a very strong foundation in your relationship, then there's going to be trouble, and there's going to be heartache, and there's going to be the playing out of repetition and old traumas and all this stuff. Not that that doesn't happen in a relationship where you don't fully give over your power, but you're going to be completely at the mercy of these things. Take it from me. And I remember reading a line from Jung a while ago talking about an overvalued woman, and this is what happens in anima possessed men. And Hercules is certainly anima possessed. That's the classic, like, oh, I'm so in love, I can't stop thinking about this woman. She's everything. And it's such a beautiful feeling, but it has to be coupled with that knowing and with aiming towards something higher, because otherwise it does end this way. And what is the solution to all of this? So he's realized his cunning, or he's remembered that he still has a mind and that he can still overcome problems, perhaps not through brute force and physical strength, but through his intellect. And this is also what ends up releasing Meg from the deal, because she does get hurt. And so Hades' deal is null. He regains his strength, but she dies in the process. And we're coming back to what it means to be a true hero, is that he had done everything that he thought he was supposed to. He utilized his divine gift of immense strength to bring order back to Thebes, and ends up joining his father in the battle to put the Titans back in their place. And I certainly don't agree with a lot of these themes. I think it's the integration. It does kind of show you the cultural lens of taming the passions or imprisoning the passions. Certainly a more integrated view would be to integrate the passions, right? Utilizing those immense forces. And it's kind of what the film is speaking to, is that they revolt. They don't like that, high and mighty Zeus is up there in Olympus all dandy, and they're down in some prison cell in hell, essentially. And so there's bitterness and resentment that builds up, and they try to tear him down and imprison him. That's how it goes. And so what happens in all of this is that, well, Hercules is going to have to go where? To the underworld. That's right. He's got to go into the pit himself, where he will have to encounter death itself, even though he was born divine. He will have to essentially relinquish everything that he thought was important. And it's this chasing after his soul in the middle of the river Styx, descending deep into the underworld, encountering birth and death. That is what permits him to be a true hero. By dying to everything that he thought that he was, and by rescuing the soul within himself, by rescuing the woman within himself, he is able to become divine. He becomes the eternal man God, and rescues his anima. And he actually, what does he do? He does what the Buddha would do, which is he attains nirvana, or he attains godhood, and then he relinquishes it willingly. Everything I've ever wanted, I've always wanted to be up here with you, Father, and with you, Mother. But mortality and samsara, that's the real paradise. And that's the idea. It's a very deep lesson from, from an animated film from 1997, which is that samsara and nirvana are not separate. And that the adventure of human life in this incarnation, when we choose it, is better than the mountain of bliss on Olympus. So I hope that this exploration has been useful. I love images and stories, and I interact with them in a way that I don't see a lot. We often take things at face or literal value, and don't see the deeper themes at play, the eternal themes, the ones that really can inform us of the stories that we're living and that we're participating in. And so I would say that if you take anything from this episode here, it's that don't set the foundations for your security, don't set the foundations for your soul and anything but your soul and something higher than yourself. And that's going to be a relationship that you develop over the course of your lifetime that will manifest in a life purpose, in an activity outside of yourself that brings you so much joy that you can withstand the calamities of the external and from other human people and the pain that you're inevitably going to encounter. And I would say too, with both individuals in any relationship, there must be the foundation of that. You cannot place your foundation in another person because they are human and because they are fallible and because it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on them that they were never meant to fulfill. The only place within each of us that we can lay that foundation is within the self, is within our own soul. And it is that foundation that is absolutely imperative in the functioning of any healthy psyche, of any healthy individual, of any healthy relationship, of any healthy community. We're all there for each other and we're all there to support. And that doesn't mean that you just exist as an island within yourself and just like, have this superficial practical relationship with someone. Maybe if that works for you, but I think a lot of us are looking for that really deep, passionate, beautiful, but also sustainable relationship where we get to know one another and we have depth across the lifetime, and all while recognizing that that person is not responsible in any way for our happiness. And life is just inevitably going to prove that to us again and again, either through their own humanness, whether that be through abandonment or betrayal or death. People's partners die. We die. We never know when it's going to come. And so really laying that foundation within the seat of your own heart, exploring your own heart's desires and putting the relationship in line with that highest value is the best thing that I can offer. And yeah, and follow your heart's calling. We were born divine. We forget and we fall from grace so that we can find it again and recognize it in a way that other beings do not. This is because animals never fall from grace. They're always just embedded within it. And that's more true of, I would say, the wilderness, right, of wild animals. There's a level of capacity and there's a level of consciousness knowing itself in us that we don't necessarily see in animals, even though they're absolutely incredibly wise, and plants and animals are as much teachers of mine, as are Carl Gustav Jung and Ken Wilber and Stan Groff and Marie Louise von Franz and all of these folks. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you start to look at your stories, the stories that you enjoy and the stories that you're living with a degree of depth that you don't normally encounter. I hope that that continues to unfold and deepen as you continue to grow and learn and live. And yeah, check back in. We got Shirley DeVere coming on in a couple months, in a month from now. And look out for more episodes on fun stories, because there's a trove of them out there. Thanks for listening, y'all. Good night.